I'm not even going to do my intro this time. Because I'm pissed. Hey, fans of Scott Pilgrim, you're the reason why I don't play video games anymore. You suck. You suck, Scott Pilgrim sucks, and I hate your sucky, stupid faces. You probably like Penny Arcade too. Yeah, I said it. Losers! Are they gone? Good. Maybe now us grown folk can have an intelligent conversation.
So, Scott Pilgrim. Yeah, I'm not digging this movie. I can understand why it has a cult following. I mean, some of it is clever in the academic sense of the word, and obviously a lot of work went into the visual effects. Just about everyone in it is either an unlikable douche or just someone who has a crush on an unlikable douche, though I suppose unlikable douches and their hangers-on need representation in movies too. But really, it's just a standard issue indie romantic comedy filtered through old-school NES logic. Michael Cera plays Scott Pilgrim, a socially awkward slacker, basically every character ever played by Michael Cera. He falls in love with Ramona Flowers, a rollerblading Amazon employee who was apparently Kate Winslet's understudy on Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. To win her love, our hero must fight her 7 exes in a series of hyper, over-stylized fights based on old Nintendo games. Although this film's idea of what constitutes an ex is pretty liberal, to say the least.
You really went out with this guy?
Yeah. In the 7th grade.
Wow, and I thought I had no life.
In between the repetitive, consequence-free fights, we meet Scott's weird and quirky friends who never let you forget for one moment how weird and quirky they are.
Because the fact of the matter is, Scott Pilgrim is easily the most boring character in this film. Personally, I blame Michael Cera.
It sort of irks me, I guess, that Cera has anything remotely resembling a career as a leading man, but I can at least see the logic behind it. We were all like him once, and then we hit puberty. However, aside from Superbad, I've never liked anything he's been in. The only Michael Cera characters who are even barely tolerable are the ones played by Jesse Eisenberg.
But, honestly, his presence here isn't a deal-breaker for me, especially since this movie seems to hate him as much as I do.
No, the problem with this movie is that it's so very, very pleased with itself. Every line, every beat, every scene exists solely to convince you just how clever the filmmakers are.
How's that working out for you? What? Being clever?
We open with the Universal logo rendered as it might have appeared on the NES, complete with a MIDI fanfare. And if you find this brilliant, well, you're gonna love this movie. We first meet our hero, as he brags to his friends about how, despite being in his early 20s, he's dating a 17-year-old girl.
I'm 22. 22.
Yes, according to this movie, this would-be statutory rapist is awesome. I think to the rest of us, he's more like that guy. And we all know who that guy is.
That's what I love about these high school girls, man. I get older, they stay the same age.
We then meet Scott's jailbait girlfriend, Knives Chow. Yes, it's a girl named Knives. A name that's never explained in the movie. So, Scott is in a band and it's called Sex Ba-Bomb. Really? Like in Ba-Bombs? Like in Super Mario?
Because that's a memory you want to conjure up.
The band consists of Scott, his ex-girlfriend Kim, a guy named Steven Stills, really? And some random guy they call Young Neil.
Hi.
Really?
What do you play?
These references are already approaching Juno levels of annoying.
Okay, let's start with Launchpad McQuack.
Get it? It's funny. Because it's from the 90s.
The director here is Edgar Wright, who also made Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. And while he's always been one to reference other movies, I honestly thought he'd be above throwing in random pop culture references just for the sake of throwing in random pop culture references.
What's that? All this is from the comic book? I'm gonna have to do actual research, aren't I? I'll be right back. Okay, so near as I can tell, this movie is extremely faithful to the graphic novels, and therefore anything that's wrong with it can be blamed on the comic's creator, Brian Lee O'Malley. So, Edgar Wright, you get a pass on this one. But I'm watching you.
Scott lives with his gay roommate, played by Richie Rich's younger brother. Well, actually he doesn't just live with him, he shares a bed with him, and also his boyfriend.
What is up with that?
What is up with that?
And then there's Scott's sister, played by Twilight's Anna Kendrick, once again reduced to playing the world's oldest 18-year-old. We also meet Scott's friend Julie, played by Aubrey Plaza, who, if you ask me, should have played the female lead. If only for the fact that the blue hair combined with her eyes would have made her look exactly like an anime character. And as you may have noticed, everyone's been getting these little name tags, which I assume were added because no one could possibly keep track of the 50 characters we meet in the first 10 minutes. I mean, geez, this guy gets a name tag, and he's only in the movie for this one scene. But it gets worse than that. Every time a phone rings, the word ring floats through the air. When the doorbell rings, we get to see Ding Dong floating around. And I'm fairly certain that if someone were to say Kilgore Trout, well, let's not go down that path.
Thanks, movie. If not for that ding-dong, this would make no sense whatsoever.
It seems there was a concerted effort to make this movie look exactly like the graphic novel, complete with shots that imitate panels of a comic book, because it worked so well for Ang Lee's Hulk. One day, Scott has a mental episode in the middle of the street and relives a scene from Wayne's World 2, but instead of getting to meet Jim Morrison, he instead catches a glimpse of a girl with punk rock hair on roller skates. This is Ramona Flowers, who he later sees at a library. How does he dream about her before he's actually met her, you ask? Like so many things in this film, we're not supposed to question it. We're just supposed to take it at face value this is all brilliant, and definitely not sloppy storytelling. Scott learns Ramona works for Amazon, so he orders something online.
Amazon.ca, what's the website for that?
Amazon.ca.
And she actually delivers it to his door.
Is this how they do things in Canada? I mean, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't exactly hook up with the person who brings me my orders off Amazon.com.
Scott invites Ramona to a concert where he's suddenly attacked by the first of her exes, Matthew Patel, who's basically the Indian version of Dr. Blight from Captain Planet. This guy not only wants to kick Scott's ass, but he also performs a Bollywood-style number about it. Hooray for stereotypes! Naturally, it's never explained why Scott has to fight Ramona's exes in the first place. Is this something that happens to every new couple in this world? Is there something special about Ramona and her exes? No one ever questions this, and no one ever questions why Scott instantly becomes a skilled fighter who easily defeats Patel. In another dumb Nintendo reference, every time Scott defeats an ex, they explode into coins, which, near as I can tell, means he's actually killed them.
Sweet. Coins.
Okay. I love Nintendo. I have just about every game that I loved as a kid on an emulator right now. Where most people see the SNES as a treasured artifact of their childhood, I see it as something that did not need to be improved upon. But, and this is a pretty big but, the whole NES motif, it's funny for about the first 20 minutes, and then it gets really old really fast.
This movie basically repeats itself 6 times as Scott fights the other exes. Next up is Chris Evans, and I do mean Chris Evans because he's basically playing himself.
Now you listen close and you listen hard, bucko. The next click you hear is me hanging up. The one after that is me pulling the trigger.
I can't tell you how much I would rather be watching that movie.
Scott then has to face off against the latest victim of the Superman curse, Brandon Routh. But first, we learn about his relationship with Ramona in a cartoon flashback.
He punched a hole in the moon for me. It was pretty crazy.
Yes, I'm sure it was. Sadly, not even punching a hole in the moon can put any emotion in her voice. Ramona's not a manic pixie dream girl, she's a manic depressive dream girl.
And get this, the guy has special powers because he's a vegan.
What are you talking about?
You just drank half and half, baby.
Freeze! Vegan police! Vegan police!
Defeating a vegetarian by exposing them to animal products. Where have I seen that before?
Meat! Meat! 100% pure beef! Beef!
Leonard Part 6 is like herpes for bad movies, isn't it?
Next up, there's the requisite lesbian ex from a phase Ramona went through.
I was just a little bi-curious.
Well, honey, I'm a little bi-curious.
Yes, that's an actual line of dialogue.
After he defeats her by touching her erogenous zone, seriously, don't ask, we move on to Scott fighting 2 Asian twins in a battle that consists of ripping off the harp scene from Kung Fu Hustle. And at no point does Scott get so much as a scratch on him. Despite weighing about 110 pounds, Scott effortlessly defeats every ex he goes up against, and he can even take on 12 guys at once without breaking a sweat. And I ask you, is there anything more boring than a fight scene where you know the hero can't possibly get hurt? Finally, Scott gets to Jason Schwartzman, who's the boss, which we know because he sits atop a high pyramid. And it turns out he got Ramona to come back to him because he installed a mind control chip in the back of her neck.
That is evil.
Well, I think now we all know what Brian O'Malley's shit looks like, because he clearly just pulled that out of his ass.
Scott comes to Ramona's rescue, confessing his love for the first time, which gets him rewarded with a sword sprouting out of his chest. Just go with it. He gets killed, but in a mildly clever bit, he's earned an extra life, which allows him to return from purgatory and start the battle all over again. He apologizes to Knives, earns a different sword, and defeats the final evil X. Unfortunately, things aren't over, because next Scott has a fight an evil clone of himself. And no, you didn't miss anything, this comes completely out of nowhere.
Nigga Scott.
Knives and Ramona wait outside while Scott anticlimactically makes peace with his doppelganger off-screen. And that's about it. Even though it's pretty obvious Knives would be a much better match for Scott, he and Ramona walk off into the sunset. They break up 2 months later. I assume. The end.
Now, if there are any fans of the movie still watching, I'd like to ask you a serious question.
It's time for a serious question with Michael A. Novelli.
Some fans of this movie tell me that this is a fairly accurate representation of what it feels like to be fresh out of college and have no clear path in life. To be in your early 20s and not be able to pretend that you're a kid anymore. Well, I dropped out of college to join the Army, so I was more or less dragged kicking and screaming into adulthood right out of high school. So, personally, I don't know what it's like to be 22 and be absolutely shell-shocked at the prospect that you might actually have to grow up. I know what it's like to be 24 and not know where your next meal is coming from. So, I get it. This movie was never intended for people like me. But for the people it was intended for, do you really consider this
I'm a little furious
to speak to you in a deep and personal way?
Do you really buy that this movie is about Scott gaining self-respect? Or do you wonder when we were supposed to notice that he had no self-respect, before or after hooking up with 3 hot chicks and fighting and obliterating 6 people? Do you really sympathize or identify with these characters, given the way every line is delivered in a lifeless, smug, detached tone? Or do you wonder why the movie never gives the characters a single quiet moment to actually express a human emotion?
In short, does this movie really speak to you about your life and your place in the world? Or is it just slightly possible that you're projecting qualities onto it that were never really there?
This has been a serious question with Michael A. Novelli.
But you know, my biggest problem with Scott Pilgrim is that every frame is stuffed with nonsense that is totally unnecessary to enjoying the film.
Do we need cartoon hearts flying from people's lips when they kiss? Do we need words floating around for us to be able to follow the plot? I mean, can anybody tell me why this movie briefly turned into a fake sitcom?
And someone has a second date tonight.
Someone's lucky then.
You know when I say someone, I mean me, right? I got to second base last night. Maybe first and a half.
Sorry, but this was way funnier when Natural Born Killers did it.
You'll end up peddling your ass, you stupid bitch. And third, you're not going out at all. You didn't mow the yard.
That piece of shit lawnmower is fine!
But that's Scott Pilgrim for you. We're not supposed to question anything, or expect anything to make any sense. Nope. You're just supposed to sit back, shut your mouth, and be in awe of the utter genius of it all. I almost think they were trying to will a cult hit into existence, which never works. Just ask the makers of Repo the generic opera.
I could go on, but Mr. Mendo's got him some grown folk business to do. Like trading this for cigarette money. I'm Mr. Mendo, and this has been Mr. Mendo's Hack Attack.